focus, but we've talked about more than just the Eastern Gate last week, and we're going to do that again today. Last week we finished with a mention of the book of Ezekiel, in which Ezekiel in chapter 44, verses 1 to 3, prophesied about the gate. And obviously well before Jesus ever came through the gate, about 500 years before Jesus entered Jerusalem through the gate. So we're going to end there and pick up with a little bit more information about the gate. And there is the gate, a two-portal gate. We mentioned it was sealed by Suleiman with his belief, after talking with rabbis, that if he did this, the Messiah, who he was nervous about, he thought the Messiah was going to be some great military leader who was going to overcome his rule in this part of the world. He was not correct in any way. The rabbis weren't right, and neither was he. We're going to talk more about that. Okay, I'm going to get down to where we were. We're going to be on page 5 today. Let's start there. As I just mentioned in that first bullet, you can see it says, hang on one second, wrong page. Here we go. The Muslims controlled Jerusalem after the turn of the century, and they tried to break the prophecy, but they failed to do that, as it says here. They were preparing to take down the gate, to demolish the gate, because they had control of the city. But on that very day that they were planning on doing that, control of Jerusalem passed from them to the British. Seems like God had the timing precisely right. So they stopped that. They stopped that work. It never happened, and the British gained control. So God had intervened. I believe God had intervened. Then in 1967, during the Six-Day War, some of the military wanted to actually demolish the gate with explosives. Jordan had gained control of that part of the city. They thought that this was the answer. Let's just surprise them and just blow it up. But as it says here in the last bullet, there was an Orthodox Jew who said no. One of the senior military people, he said, no, we can't do this. It'll only be open when the Messiah comes. Of course, Jews still believe the Messiah hasn't come, of course. That's the greatest stumbling block. As a Jew, I can tell you that I had that belief most of my life until I came here, and then I learned the truth. The truth is that the Messiah has already come once, and he will come again. So the Jews are mistaken. They're ever so close, ever so close. Very few are closer than the Jew to the truth. Those who step into the area of the truth, like me, we're blessed. We're very blessed. I'm very blessed that later in life, not recently, but later in life, I found the truth. Okay. All right. We talked about the structure. We just mentioned it again, that there really are two portals. There's not one opening, and you can see it in the picture. Both lead to the Temple Mount, which is just on the other side. The portals have two names. Now, I've given you the names in what's called transliteration or in English. And I've also given you the Hebrew, but I want to explain something about the way the Hebrew is presented here on these pages. Because our writing systems, our applications in all computer systems in this country are geared to write whatever you put in on a left to right basis, because that's how we read English. Unless you install an application for Hebrew within your system to actually have it correctly write Hebrew from right to left, it won't happen. You can cut and paste. You think you got it made. Well, I'll just cut and paste and I'll just move them in the right. You can't do it. It refuses to accept, for example, Word will not accept what I just said by just switching the position of two words. Can't do it. So I say that because we look at the southern portal. The name of the southern portal in Hebrew is Sha'ar HaRachamim. Sha'ar HaRachamim. To the right of that is the Hebrew for that. Now, you can probably guess by just looking at the two Hebrew words, there are two there, that there's a longer Hebrew word and there's a shorter Hebrew word. Now, again, Hebrew is read from right to left. So Sha'ar would be on the right, and Harachamim would be on the left, and you would read it from right to left. Well, you can see, just by the length of the words, that what's happened. Sha'ar is on the left. That's not correct for Hebrew. And Harachamim is on the right. So I just want you to be aware of that. The words are correct, but they're in the wrong order because it's not placing them in the correct order from a Hebrew context. Okay, so there you go. Sha'ar is on the left, it should be on the right, and Harachamim is on the right. So what does this mean? We talked a little bit about this before. Sha'ar is Hebrew for the word gate. Ha is the word in English the. Rachamim, mercy. Gate, the gate of mercy. The mercy gate. Or the golden gate. Now, the Jews will call it the mercy gate, and Christians will call it the golden gate, but we refer to it as the mercy gate as well, and also just the eastern gate, all the same. So that's the northern port. That's the southern portal. Now, which is the southern portal? Obviously, it's the one that faces south. The northern portal is Sha'ar HaTshuvah, Sha'ar HaTshuvah, or the gate of repentance. Again, the words are reversed. The Hebrew should have Sha'ar on the right. It has it on the left. The eastern gate, as we now know it, was built on the ruins of the eastern gate at the time of the Second Temple. So, as you see here, the Byzantine Empire built it sometime in that time frame that you see. It's a very long time frame. Nobody knows exactly. The records are they're not keeping good records. Okay, they didn't have the building department keep records back then, so it's kind of a guess. Somewhere in that long period of time, the gate was built. The Second Temple, we talked about this last week, which was built during Herod's reign. When he built the Second Temple, he made some upgrades like you would if you were, remodeling your home, so to speak. It was also made a little larger than it was before, and he finished it about 20 BC. So about 50 years, approximately, give or take, before Jesus actually entered the second gate, the eastern gate, after the Second Temple was finished. There's a little interesting note about King Cyrus in regard to Jerusalem and its availability to the Jews. Cyrus conquered Babylon at about 513 BC. And when he did that, he then permitted Jews to return to Jerusalem. They didn't take him up on that right away. It took a long time before they started to return, but they could have. He gave them that opportunity. The second temple, as you see, took about 46 years to build. In John 2, which is on the screen, you can see that this is this quote from John 2:20. Then said the Jews, now this is in regard to Jesus' comment, which they didn't quite understand. They just did not understand the concept of 3 days. They say, then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in the building, and thou rear it up in 3 days? Well, of course, he was not talking about the temple. We all know he was talking about himself, but they didn't understand. They didn't quite catch that. The Romans came in 70 AD, approximately 35 to 40 years after Jesus was there and destroyed Jerusalem. Matthew Matthew 24, verses 1 to 3, speaks of this. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another, and shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, again, the Mount of Olives is to the east of the eastern gate, just on the other side of the Kidron Valley. You can see it clearly from the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? The city destroyed by Rome, the stones toppled from all locations, the temple in particular. The stones, some of those stones are still there. They're at the foot of the western wall, and they're not easily movable, as each stone weighs between 2 and 3 tons. So they're not going anyplace. And if you go to Jerusalem, you can see them. It's pretty awesome. I use the word awesome in the best way possible. Because when you see those stones, just everything comes alive. We read about this stuff, and then if you're fortunate enough to go to Israel, you get a feeling that's so deep, it's hard to describe it. It truly is hard to describe. I'll tell you a quick story. Not related to the Eastern Gate. My wife and I were fortunate to go a couple of times. And so the second time we were there, we were in the southern part of the city, and we exited the gate there. And above the city is a climb. There's a bit of a climb. Stone stairs climb to the top of this rise. And on the top of that rise is Caiaphas' house, the high priest who oversaw the beating and the crucifixion of Jesus. His house is there. And we know that Jesus was taken out of the old city and up those stone steps to get, because that's the only way you can get up to the house where he was imprisoned within the confines of Caiaphas, the high priest's house, and beaten prior to his crucifixion. So The first time we were in Israel, we didn't go up to the house, but this time we did. So I was so taken by the fact that this, you may think that you can guess where Jesus would have walked, because you know where he walked in so many places, whether it was the temple, in Galilee, or whether he was in the Mount of Olives, or whether he was coming through the Eastern Gate. You know the general location, but you can't know exactly where he stepped. That's not possible. You can guess, except in this case, he had to go up those stone steps, which are the same steps. So here I am, looking like a 3-year-old kid. So what am I doing? I stepped on the first stone step, and I crisscrossed with little steps all the way up, all the way up to the top. And I said, I know for a certainty that I walked where he walked, because those are the same stone steps. And I didn't miss an inch of any of those steps. So there you go. It was great. I looked like a complete fool. Everybody else is at the top looking down. What the heck is Jay doing? Has he lost his mind? I explained it. I didn't want to think people believe that I had suddenly gone insane. Okay, just a little side story. Okay, we talked briefly last week about Ezekiel and his prophecies. In fact, we closed that, and we mentioned it when we opened up this morning. The Ezekiel prophecies were written about 2,600 years ago, and that jives because we said earlier that he wrote them about 500 years before Jesus came down to earth to be with us. And they were written during the Babylonian captivity. Let me scroll down a little bit. We know that Ezekiel, like others that we know about from the Bible, was given this power to be able to see into the future. It's very telling that we can read about something in the Bible so many years before and have it come to life. It's part of the reason why, for many people, the Bible is true, because of prophecy. A lot of people are skeptical about whether or not the Bible actually is what people claim it to be, but you can't ignore prophecy, and not generalized prophecy, specifics, very, very specific things. It's powerful stuff, powerful. I want to read again from Ezekiel 43, 1-4. This was his vision. It's right there on the screen. Afterward, he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looketh toward the east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like a noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. Matthew 24:27. We go on. For as the lightning come out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Why did this happen? People were in disobedience. The Jews still are. Some came into obedience. Somebody did not and still have not. Paying no attention to Jesus. I know before I was saved, I didn't either. It's very funny how we used to listen to things like, well, Jesus died, and then he was resurrected. So we would hear that, and for some reason we would accept that, but we wouldn't accept him as being God. I don't really understand the disconnect, but we did have a disconnect, and still do. Many Jews feel the same way. They go, oh yeah, okay, he died, got resurrected, and so that ought to be enough. It's not. Okay, back to Ezekiel 43:3. And it was according to the appearance of the vision which I saw, even according to the vision that I saw when I came to destroy the city. This is an announcing of that 70 AD destruction. Hundreds of years, half a century, 5 centuries before, I should say 5 centuries before it happened. And the visions were like the vision that I saw by the river Chebar, and I fell upon my face. And the glory of the Lord came into the house by the way of the gate, whose prospect is toward the east. Again, the eastern gate. We'll go on. We're going to run. We're running obviously way behind because we started so late. See if we can't speed it up. Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, which looketh toward the east, and it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, this gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it, therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord, and he shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same. It's for Jesus in his return, obviously. So the gate awaits the Messiah's second coming. The temple vessels, as I mentioned before, that the Jews had prepared for what they believe is the first arrival of the Messiah already. You can see them. I mentioned that last week. So Jesus enters Jerusalem Palm Sunday. Again, through the Eastern Gate, approximately 30 AD. Long before the Ottomans sealed it up. Luke 19:28-48. And when he had thus spoken, he went before, ascending up to Jerusalem. Again, I said last week, everything is up to Jerusalem, even if you're going south, because Jerusalem sits so high versus the rest of the country. At the mount called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples to fetch a colt, saying, go into the village over against you, in which at your entering ye shall find a colt tied, whereupon yet never met man sat. Loose him and bring him hither. Let's go down. And if any man ask you, why do you loose him? Thus shall ye say unto him, because the Lord hath need of him. And they that were sent their way and found even as he had said unto them, and as they were loosing the colt, the owners thereof said unto them, why loose ye the colt? And they said, the Lord hath need of him. And they brought him to Jesus, and they cast their garments upon the colt, and they set Jesus thereon. And as he went, they spread their clothes in the way. And when he was come nigh, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen. Let me go down a little bit more. Sorry, my apologies. We're going to speed up. We're not going to read the rest of the passages. We don't unfortunately have time, but they're there for you if you just, go into your Bible. The story continues. Many of you know the story very well. The story also continues with Jesus going into the temple, right, and overturning the money changers' tables. Obviously, the temple was not being used for the purpose in which it was designed. We would say somebody doing that would be considered irate. Why is he so angry? Well, it's not the purpose. It's to be a holy place, not a place of finagling and bartering and stealing, which was happening. Okay, we're going to move on to, let's see, again, trying to save a little time. Okay. The second coming. Matthew 23 is a good place to be. Verses 37 to 39. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth, till ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. You know, you can continue to look at Matthew and other references. We're not going to look at, I don't think we have time for Matthew Henry completely. Let me see if I can kind of cherry pick what Matthew Henry says. Matthew Henry's commentary. Let me see if I can find. Okay, yeah, we're going to continue down. Again, we're running a little short on time. Henry closes this portion of his commentary with something I'd mentioned before, the blindness of the Jews, where he says, their continued blindness and obstinacy. Ye shall not see me, that is, not see me to be the Messiah, for otherwise they did see him upon the cross, not see the light of the truth concerning me, nor the things that belong to your peace, till ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh. They will never be convinced till Christ's second coming convinces them, when it will be too late to make an interest in him, and nothing will remain but a fearful looking for of judgment. Well, the lost, that's their ultimate end. We pray that we can reach as many people as we can. Jews, as I said earlier, are so very close. But it's difficult. It's difficult. Having witnessed to Jews, and when a Jew witnesses to a Jew, you think, well, I've got a real edge. Okay. Well, I've got a little bit of an edge in that they might listen to me a little more intently, but they don't necessarily believe me. And therein lies the difference. It's hard. It's very, very hard. I mentioned last week when Gershon Solomon was here, and I had the opportunity to be in the car with him and his wife for about an hour and a half. Very difficult, very difficult. Part of the problem, I think, was that he was obstinate, and so was his wife. And Dr. Lindstrom had tried, and when Dr. Lindstrom tries and is unsuccessful, you know you've got a tough nut to crack. I think part of it was the fact that they looked at themselves as being Orthodox Jews. So, and they weren't high and mighty people. They had no ego. But it's as if they just knew a little bit more because of their orthodoxy. And was not an Orthodox Jew, so although I understood where they were coming from, so it was very hard. And it's still hard. I remember being in Jerusalem and talking to this Jewish, it was a kid, a teenager. And so I told him that I was Jewish, and he threw his hands up, and because I was witnessing to him, and he couldn't understand that. How could a Jewish person be witnessing to me about believing in Jesus? What are you talking about? He was confused. Didn't make sense to him that a Jew would do this. I don't think he'd ever been witnessed to, frankly. I think that was the first time, and by a Jew. It's one thing to be witnessed to by a Christian who's not Jewish, but to be witnessed by a Christian who's Jewish, it didn't make any sense to him. So his brain was on overdrive. Okay. Okay, let's go to Zechariah 14:4-5. This is about the second coming of the Mount of Olives. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. So it's going to split horizontally, because the eastern gate is just to the west of the Mount of Olives. It's going to split horizontally, east to west, toward the east and west, and toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half toward the south. So this is going to cut across where the Kidron Valley is and create yet another valley. So it's kind of like, an X marks the spot, so to speak. So you're going to have two valleys. I don't know which one's going to be bigger. Doesn't say. But the Kidron Valley is quite deep. A little less than a half a mile. It's a couple of thousand feet. It's pretty high up there. So, okay. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Azal is about a half a mile away from Jerusalem. Yea, ye shall flee, like as you fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. Nice day. I don't know how many of you will be there, but I'm looking forward to it. Okay? I don't mind going back to Jerusalem for the third time. It's okay. I'm good. I'm good with it. This one will be a little better, I'm thinking. A little better. Okay. We got about 2 minutes. Okay, we've talked about the rejection of the Messiah. Okay, another photo. This is taken from the Mount of Olives, looking west across the Kidron Valley below, and you can see these are all tombs and markers for grave sites. It's completely coated on both sides. As you can see, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. So many. Because people believed, as it says, that there would be judgment coming from the east, people wanted to be close. People vied to get close. They wanted to be as close as possible because they wanted to be saved first. Saved in not the way we would expect. Jews, as you know, many Jews believe in resurrection. We know historically Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. The Pharisees did. Jews today do believe in resurrection because they do believe in heaven, not necessarily hell. Okay, not necessarily hell. We don't have time to go into that today. That might be another nice lesson. Okay. So there are some people that are praying there in the foreground. Okay. So it says there are many Muslim, Christian, and Jewish graves around the eastern slopes of the Temple Mount and on the western slopes of the Mount of Olives, so both sides. So you see Mount of Olives, stone. A little quick thing on Jews. We're a little slightly over, but it's okay. Jews, you may know, when they visit a gravesite, they put stones on top of the headstone. It's what you do, not flowers. You can bring flowers if you like, but stones are what are brought. So if you don't have any stones around the grave, you might have to start looking for some. Sometimes we've gone to a gravesite and actually bring some with us because there's a permanence to stones. That flowers wither and die and blow away, and the stones don't. This is interesting. The last bullet. A belief that the soul dwells for a while on earth, and the stones can help prevent the soul from leaving. That's this little piece of Orthodox Jewry that believe this. Most Jews don't have any idea about this. They're not knowledgeable about this, but there is that belief. These are more passages about the glorious appearing, and that would conclude it. And we ran about a minute and to over, and I thank you very much for being here, and I hope that we'll get something out of today's presentation. Thank you again.